Can you heal yourself and rise to leadership in the Navy's highest enlisted ranks? In this powerful episode today, we're joined by Amaury Ponciano, an inspiring example of authenticity, accountability, and transformation. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I am doing really, really well. I'm so honored to have you. In fact, I really don't have a whole lot of people who come to the show from the enlisted community. And one of the things I've been saying to myself is I need to have more enlisted people on the broadcast because one, I'm prior enlisted. So I definitely have my heart, that's where I'm from. And also just because you're the heart and soul of the Navy, like the military does not operate without a strong enlisted force. So I can't wait to talk to you. I'm going to read a little bit about your bio, and then I'm just going to get started with some questions. We do have comments that you can chime in during the broadcast. If I don't get to your comment, we'll take care of it after the broadcast. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And if you're on any of those websites and seeing this broadcast, please be sure to hit subscribe, hit like, follow. Definitely want to get as much support as possible for this passion project. So from surviving the tragic USS Cole bombing to battling his own personal demons, Amaury's story is a raw and honest reminder that true leadership begins with owning your struggles and turning them into strengths. Born in the Dominican Republic and raised in New Jersey, Amaury's 20 plus years of Navy service have been defined by resilience, sacrifice, and the pursuit of excellence. Today, we're going to talk about how he witnessed the unimaginable loss during the USS Cole disaster, confronting personal flaws, including a battle with serial womanizing, balancing the demands of military life with his roles as a son, father, and mentor. But his journey isn't just about challenges, it's also about growth. He's a two-time master's degree graduate, most recently earning one in applied cyber operations from the Naval Postgraduate School. He's a global traveler who's visited over 80 countries and 100 cities, a soccer enthusiast and a lover of cultural exploration through food. His why are his kids and leaving a legacy his mother and children can be proud of. And today we're also going to be talking about his amazing book, Anchored in Resilience, Overcoming Adversity Through Mental Health Awareness. Whether you're navigating your own struggles or striving to be a better leader and human, today, this conversation, we hope, will leave you inspired to take accountability, embrace growth, and lead with authenticity. Welcome again.
Thank you.
So first off, I always ask my guests, where were you born and raised, and how did your journey into the military begin?
So I was born in the Dominican Republic, in the capital, Santo Domingo. My parents got divorced when I was about 3 years old. So unfortunately, because of that, I bounced a lot from whether it was living with my mom to living with my dad to then living with some of my aunts. I think I was given too much freedom as a child to choose where I wanted to be. So if I didn't feel comfortable, like when my dad got remarried, so if I didn't like my stepmom, I will say I don't want to live here. I want to live somewhere else. And we were very poor, right? And my mother remarried as well. And the person that she married, he had a citizenship in the United States. So he did the paperwork for her and my brothers at the time. And he actually included me, but because I come from a different marriage, I needed my dad to sign the papers for me to leave, but he didn't. His reasoning was simply that he was scared that I will be coming to the U.S., to New York, where there might be a lot of drugs, and he didn't want me to get caught up on that, right? Unfortunately, that's not what I was told to me by him. He just simply said that my mother left me, which you can only imagine what that does to an 8-9-year-old. So finally, I came to the U.S. in 1994. My dad finally signed the papers in 1991. I'm sorry, because my granddad was passing, and that was as he was in his bed, about to die, kind of thing. He asked my dad as a favor to sign the papers so I could come to the U.S. and I had a lot of anger in me when I came to the U.S. Right? I was very tough.
because you thought your mom didn't. Did you ever get a chance to really ask her or talk to her during this time that your dad was saying, "Oh no, no"?
No, I at that time I still had my dad in like this view that like he wouldn't lie to me, and
Yeah.
yeah, he just, why would he do that, right? And then it was just little things that my mom did that there were also like mistakes within it. Like for example, when she left, because she didn't want to see me crying in the airport. I didn't go to say goodbye to her to the airport. I found out that my mom left to the U.S. like 3 days later, right? Because I asked my aunt, like, where's my mom, kind of thing. Or she will come from the summer, and she will bring me like all these clothes from the U.S. and like toys and things. So like my focus will go as a child to go to dad, but then the anger will go back as soon as she had to go back, right? Come back to the U.S. Which she only will go there for like a couple of weeks she took vacation from work. So it was never something that was talked about until I finally moved in with her when I was 14. And the only reason even was, which is surprised me to an extent, that she waited this long. It was because for that first year that I was there, like I said, I was really bad. Like from something as simple as she telling me to take out the trash or to do a chore, I will tell her something smart like, well, if you would have raised me, would have done this better, or like just smart comments like that. And
Right, just resentful and angry.
exactly. And then she got to the point where it was enough. And back in those days is when you had like two phones in two different locations, but you only had like one line in your house. So she called my dad while I was on the other side of the phone, and she just told me to be quiet. And she started asking him questions related to how that happened, how it actually went down. And it was something that he said that like kind of did not match up to what he's been telling me for years. So I finally got like said something while I was crying, and I was like, so it's true that you just lied to me, that you just like told me that my mom left me, when in reality was that you didn't sign the papers. And he just stayed quiet, which to me was the answer that it was true, that what my mom was saying instead of what he'd been saying for years. So funny enough, then like my mom became then this top.
The more powerful parent in your life. But do you think that your dad also just didn't want you to leave him? Like he wanted you there to be with him?
I would understand that if I was living with him, but I was living with my aunts from my mom's side. And
Yep.
I like looking back while it's happening, you don't think of it, especially as a teenager. But I do remember like whenever we had the weekends that he will come get me for the weekends, where I will try to do like little things like sit by his side as he's playing dominoes with his friends. And I recall vividly like yesterday where he will just give me money so I could buy, drinks or ice cream or whatever, kind of like so I could get away. Right. And I probably was trying to be all in the game while he's playing with adults. So I'm gonna give him some grace on that. But I don't really believe that it's necessarily more about that he wanted me to be around because he wanted me to be there. I think he still didn't want me to go because of the drugs and things that were in New York, like because that's where my mom used to live before she moved to New Jersey. So, hindsight, right? What I try to learn from that experience is you have to be completely honest with your children, even at whatever age they might be, and tell them the entire facts. So that way you don't have to go back 10 years later and trying to redo the story. I wish he would have just simply told me that, like instead of saying that my mom left me, say, hey, I didn't sign it because I didn't feel like you will be safe over there. I would probably still be upset, right? Because I miss my mother, but it would make more sense than just simply your mom left you.
Right. And then have you blaming your mom and angry at your mom all these years for something that wasn't really the truth of how these things turn out. And something like that leaves like a really deep scar. Like you said, and I know that shaped what happened throughout your military journey. And tell us a little bit about what made you decide to join the Navy. How did that start?
So I was doing well in school, and I remember there was one program, one class you had to take, like the junior year or senior year, where they take you to a college, and depending on what documents your parents sign, they allow you to even stay overnight with like a sophomore or a junior from the school. And I went to two schools. I went to Boston College, and there was another university in New Jersey. But for some reason, the person that they put me with both times was a party going, having the time of their life kind of thing. And I told myself as a 17-year-old, very honest with myself, I was like, if I come to school and I'm away from my parents, I'll probably do one semester, and then I'll be dropping out, or the money will be wasted because I will just be having fun.
Yep.
And I also knew that my mom didn't have that kind of money, so all I was offered was like partial scholarships here and there to like a couple of schools. So the military started coming to the conversation just simply because her husband at the time, he was prior Army. So he was like, hey, if you want, what was some of the things he would say? If you want stability, if you want structure, the military is, and benefits, right? So funny enough, I took my ass back for the Army. But the Army recruiter, all he was talking about was infantry. And I was like, no, I want to work with computers. And like most recruiting office, all you have to do is just walk outside, and in that P-way, there's full of other offices. And I just went. The next one was to the Navy, and I just saw a bunch of pictures that the recruiter have in the back with beautiful places, beautiful women, and I was sold. I was like, if you could get the paperwork from the Army guy, then I will join the Navy, next month kind of thing. And that's what made me pick the Navy.
Right. It's really interesting how important it is to know someone who served or have just some sort of frame of reference of somebody around you that understands the military for you to actually want to join. And for me, it was very similar. I lived with a Marine reservist. His name was Ryan Thornton. And he just talked about it and told me that it would be 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer. It'd be this part-time gig. And I was like, okay, I'll go see a recruiter. And then the recruiter just talked me into going full time. And it wasn't even like I even understood what I was doing, but I had Ryan. And then there was a guy I was hanging out with at the time named Andrew Sword, who also was like, yeah, you should do this. And really, it was not something that was in my family. My dad was drafted in the Army for a couple of years, but he didn't talk about it a lot. So it was something completely out of the ordinary from all my friends. For you and the people that you were hanging around with at the time, was this a surprising decision for people?
Actually, no. Like my best friend, which was funny because he was going through it. We talked about everything, but for some reason, he was not telling me that he was going through trying to go into the military and the Navy until I said something. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm also trying to do it as well. So we both joined, and actually there was another guy. So it was a group of like 6 of us that we always hang out. And 3 out of the 6, we joined the Navy, actually, all 3 of us. The last one, he put for buds, and like we were watching a movie later on. Make the story short, he never like showed up to go to boot camp or anything because he got scared once he saw the things that you have to do if you're trying to become a Navy SEAL. So, but me and my best friend, like we joined. He actually just got out like after his first tour. But yeah, it was surprising in the sense because to them, mostly because of my grades. Like I had really good grades. I was, I could have probably, they thought I was going to go to college. Like I was the goody two-shoes in the group. But the bottom line is I didn't have a full scholarship for anything. So my parents didn't have that money. And then 2, I honestly just did not see myself having that structure. Like I just knew that because my mom was talking about retiring back to Dominican Republic. So I knew that she was not going to be there to kind of keep me straight or even live with her while I was going to school. So I just had to make that decision and to say, yeah, I'm just gonna waste money and I will have to pay it back. So I was like, I don't.
Yeah. Well, it's just interesting because I really do believe that this book is more about like a sailor's journey. Like there's so much in this book that gives people the backstory of what it's really like to serve in the Navy. And really never know from one duty station to the next duty station where you're going to end up, which countries you're going to visit, what experiences you're going to have. I mean, it's just such an unpredictable roller coaster. So tell me a little bit about after you go through boot camp, and then after boot camp, you decide to go into IT. Now, how did that all come about?
So I was given, I was lucky enough that I was given the rate of an IT, right? So at the time we were still even called RMs because that's what we were called.
Right. That's right. Yep.
So I was the last class that was singing RMA school as we were walking in Great Lakes. And then while I was in class, I remember that like I was number 2 in class, and it was time to pick orders. And my only question to my instructor was, I want to go somewhere where I'm able to do everything within my rate, and I want it to be a newer ship, right? Because we were told all the males, which was crazy to me, all the males had to go to ships, all the females had to go to shore duty, right? Like that was the thing back then.
Yeah.
And so I went down the list. The first guy, the number 1, he picked I remember like it was yesterday, he picked the John F. Kennedy out of Mayport at that time. It was the old John F. Kennedy carrier. And so then I went down the line, and he was like, my instructor was like, the USS Cole is the newest destroyer, which at that time she was commissioned in 1996. And this was back in 99. So she was like the newest commissioned DDG. And, that she was out of Norfolk. So that kind of also helped me because I was like, well, it's close enough, as close as I could get to my mother to Jersey without being in Jersey,
Right.
Virginia. So took orders to the Cole. I remember my sponsor telling me to show up a little bit earlier than my 30 days that I was allowed because we were going to go to do some exercise, and then we were going to go on deployment. And she wanted me to prepare for an exercise before, so I could get a taste of it before going on deployment, which actually was something great that if I could tell a sailor, I will say the same thing, to kind of get your feet wet, for lack of other words, before you hit a big deployment. But yeah, and then we went on deployment on August 2nd of 2000.
So what's great is that you got to see the workup cycle, and then you got to see the workup cycle is where we train to do all the things that we might have to do on deployment, and we go through different phases called, well, I don't know what it's called now, but basic, intermediate, and advanced. And in each one of these phases, we see different sides of the ship that are going to need to be tested or exercised to face any kind of threat. And so it's a really great opportunity for you to gel with your division and to get the culture of the ship and to work out all of the bugs. You get assessors that come out and test you on everything. And so it's really great that you got to see that as a real junior sailor, the workup cycle, and then you did the deployment.
Yeah, and like I said, it was so good to, like, of course I was lost, and a lot of confusion and a lot of things, and getting used to a small little rack and like all these things. But if you think about it, I rather that way, because we came back home and then we went to Palm Leave and all this other stuff. Like, at least I got that out. So by the time I was on deployment, I was ready and focused on being on deployment instead of having to learn where's the galley, or where's the hours of the galley, or how it is to fire if it happens, because I've been doing that training already, or how it is to do on rep, replenishment, like out to sea, like all that we went through all those things. So by the time deployment came, it wasn't, I mean, you can't count for everything, but like most of the regular basic stuff was nothing new to me. So it was truly an advantage as a young seaman, E1 at the time, to be able to go through all that stuff. And I actually even started my clock to go be a food assistant attendant, FSA, what they call it now. So.
Yep. Yep, it's a big step for everyone who gets to a ship. In my world, as an Airedale, is the line shack. That was where I had to start. I was fortunate because I had one duty station before I got to my ship, and so by the time I came to my duty station, I was already in E4, the Sea Control Squadron 35, VS-35. So I did not have to go to the line shack. But the line shack, kind of similar to the FSA duties that a ship's company do. And I don't know, maybe the Airedales, I think they also go down and do FSA duties as well, from my understanding. So
yeah, some of them do one in a carrier, right? Because everybody has to go from each department. Yes.
Exactly. Also, I meant to say, I'm sure you probably know her, or I'm guessing you do. Leah Stiles says, always proud of your bravery. Amaury, thanks for setting the example. I just cherish former senior chief Leah Stiles. She is a former CS and definitely has become a friend now for the past couple of years. So when did things, now we're going to transition to kind of the culminating moment of your career, I think, or one, but you know what though, after reading the book, that's a part of what you've gone through, but man, it does, it shaped things, but it's not the big part of your story. My view is the big part of your story is the finding the love in your children and just the way you worked on yourself. But let's go back to the Cole. So tell us a little bit about what happened on that deployment leading up to the tragedy on board USS Cole.
So kind of to give the background, because I feel it's important to talk about.
And I'm going to put you on screen while you talk.
Was that?
Putting you on full screen while you talk, so I'm still here.
So for the Cole, right? We went on deployment, and the way that we had the schedule back in one, we were not at war. This was before 9/11. And things were a lot more relaxed, and we were independent steaming, which means we were not attached to a strike group. We was by ourselves. So our schedule literally was we would pull into a port on a Monday, be there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we will leave on a Friday, be out to sea Friday afternoon, Saturday, Sunday, and then pull into another port on Monday. So it was fantastic for a young seaman. It's like, oh my God, I'm just going to all these different cities. This is why I joined the Navy. But what I will say, and between that and those 2.5 days that we were out to sea, we did a lot of drills. And if it was not drills that were general quarter that were done by the ship as a whole, there was drills that were done within my shop and the IT world, like my leading petty officer, my LPO. He will literally unplug things and make us fix it, right? So there was a constant training. There was a constant, how would you fix this gear? And if this gear doesn't work, what would you kick into? Or what would you do with this? And that. So our mindset was, and our CEO had us in the mindset of like, yeah, we're going to have fun. I'm going to pull you into these ports. We're going to be there for 4 days. But when we're out to sea, we're going to practice just in case, right? Like that was the key thing, just in case something happens. And then we went through the Suez Canal and we had an oil leak. And that was like a real deal, like an emergency. So we went to general quarters, like it was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We lost a lot of fuel. So we had to pull into the port to refuel. And, the ship was told to go to Aden, Yemen. If you go, as we were going into Yemen as a seaman in the destroyer, you're part of every evolution. In my case, I was part of the sea and anchor detail, which is used to moor the ship to a pier. I was in the forward part up front in line number 1. And I remember as we were coming into the port, it looked weird to all of us because there was a few ships that were sunk. And they were from their own navy, for the Yemenese Navy, but still, I'd never seen that in another port. And the way the port was kind of, if you could picture it, the harbor was kind of like a U, right? And then just the land, and then in the middle of it, it was a small pier that was for refueling. And so we pulled in, facing towards land, but the CEO, told their authorities that he wanted to, turn the ship just in case something happened, which meant that the starboard side, the right side of the ship, was moored to that small little pier. So we started refueling. They secured the sea and anchor detail. I went down to my shop, which is, we call it radio, and the XO came over the speaker, the 1MC, and said, "Hey, we're refueling faster than expected, so we're going to call early TOW for watch release, so that way you guys could go back to sea and anchor detail and we can leave." I was training a deck seaman, me and another seaman Guana. He was an IT. We were training a deck seaman Waverly, who wanted to become an IT. And when the word was passed, all three of us went from radio to the mess line to grab some food. The two of them decided to go up front because, when you are the person that has the next watch, you get ahead of the line privilege. This is like one of the few times that I guess my womanizer part of me and my desires to be talking to a woman actually helped. Because I stayed behind because I wanted to talk to a girl, right? And I say that because within 5 minutes later, I heard the loudest noise I ever heard in my life, and my feet came off the ground. I hit myself in the back, and I hit the person that I was talking to. And my first thought was, did the refueling station blew up, right? And I was standing on the starboard side inside of the ship. So that would have meant that I would have been killed if it would have been that. So
where were you on the mess decks? Were you like in the eating area, or were you like by the serving line? I'm just picturing it in my head because I've been on a DG.
By the serving line, right? I don't know if you've ever been on board a destroyer, but it's by the serving line in the middle. Okay, I was in the repair 5, which is midships. I was literally standing by the door of repair 5. Okay. So I, heard the noise. Everybody's kind of like, what's going on? And I kind of take like a few steps to look to where the mess line is going. And I'm not trying to make light of this, but it looked like in the movies when you see smoke and fire coming towards you. So, of course, all of us panic, the ones that are still standing and are not hurt, and we decide to go back aft back to the ship to see if we could get out of the ship to go outside to the flag deck. But that's when the XO came from topside, and he started passing word of mouth because the 1MC, the speaker, did not work. And he said, "Hey, we've been hit. We don't know if there's snipers out there, so go to the GQ station." And my station was radio, so I head down to radio. I get there, and my chief is there with with an IT1, first class petty officer, and a second class petty officer. And she tells me, "Look, I have the 2 people for the save, just in case we have to do destruction. Go back to your old repair locker." And my old repair locker was repair 2, which was a forward. So I head that way, and I don't remember if it was a chief or an officer, but it was someone that was wearing they had a khaki veil. I do remember that. And he just said, "Hey, all the damage control efforts are being done back aft by repair 3, so head back that way." So I, again, just following directions, I head down that way. Now that I recall I remember that like I was doing stuff that I was doing just a muscle memory, like closing hatches that I remember that I had to do, right? Because I used to be the one of the set the boundary for my repair locker. So as I was heading back aft, I was just closing things as I was going, just to ensure that there was no fire or water or anything going. But on my way there, right around midships, where the scullery is, I saw a body that was covered with a blanket. And I don't know why, but something told me to just lift the blanket and see who it is. And it was Seaman Gunn. And he was a single man, or now at QMs. And he was one of those that, like, we had a group of like 5 of us that we hang out with. He was one of them. And that's when it really like hit me. And the 19-year-old me came out. Like I was not a sailor in that moment anymore. I was just simply a 19-year-old scared. And I started to cry, and I just froze. I was on my knees and I just couldn't move. I don't know how long was that for, 30 seconds, 2 minutes. I can't tell you, but I do know that someone tapped me on my shoulder and he said, hey, he's dead. We need to save the ship and we need to save ourselves. And that kind of made me snap. Um, and then I headed back down to repair 3 like I was supposed to. I was still crying, was still scared, but I headed back there. And then after that, I was I was doing what I was told, right? Like there was
Right.
nothing heroic about what I did. I just was simply, hey, we need you to bring these buckets here because the space is flooding. We need you to take this P100, which was used to deflood spaces, to just, I literally just stood there to look at it, make sure that it was working for 20, 30 minutes. Um, but what I do recall from when I think back, all that I had in my head was, I'm going to do whatever they tell me to do because I wanted to go back to my mother. Like that was my drive for doing anything and everything they told me to do, right? I wish I could tell you that it was, I wanted to save the ship. I wanted to even save my other shipmates. But at that time, Seaman Ponciano, all I was thinking was the one person that I loved the most at that time, which was my mother. I didn't have my children or anything like that at that time. So I just wanted to go home to her. For the next couple of days, we didn't have any clean water. So I'll let you, picture how that is as far as not even able to go to the head. We didn't have any food. All we had was whatever was in the ship's door, which thankfully was up forward. So it wasn't damaged because the reefer decks were completely damaged. So we didn't have any food. And we had to sleep outside in the skin of the ship, with sometimes temperature reaching about 120 degrees because we were in Yemen. So those first 72 hours were pretty horrible, right? The shock of like seeing your friends, because a small crew like that, you get to know people really well. So I knew everybody. We all knew everybody, right? Like, and I remember as I was going and doing all the things that I was doing, I remember seeing people and be like, okay, he's alive, or she's alive, or yes, she's injured, but she's still alive. Like, and then it got to a point where I was like, where's so-and-so and where's so-and-so and where, and you start thinking and then they start telling you that they're in different places. And then as the smoke cleared, I started going to places with other people and I got to see a couple of other bodies, unfortunately, that they passed away. And something that will always haunt me, but I just needed I needed that closure to move on. Like I wanted to see where were they, right? They were my people that I knew, and yeah, it's something that I to this day I go through therapy, and the people that I need to ensure that it doesn't consume me.
Right. How was your leadership during this time? Like, was your CO and the XO and the CMC, were they keeping people informed, or were they just as overwhelmed as everybody else? Like, how did you feel like as a culture, the culture of the ship?
I will say that because I was so low on the totem pole as a seaman, I did hear from my chief. Like my chief did keep us, the IPs, our little division, informed. Mm-hmm. This is what's going on. I will say though that there were, I think it was by the second day or third day, we started doing colors. The CO, I remember our chief and department LCPO telling us, all of us, like an all hands for combat system operations, because that's where we were part of back then. Kind of like, we want to bring some level of normalcy. So we need to start having colors. We need to, clean where we could clean, like just little things. And I can tell you right now, Seaman Ponciano could not understand why we're worrying about doing colors when it's hot as you know what. I could start smelling the dead bodies because they haven't been pulled out, right? And so I didn't get it, right? And because it was so hot, they would allow us to bring our coveralls down, just wear that white shirt and kind of tie our coveralls in the middle. Well, what happened when we would have to do colors is you have to be put your uniform back together. So I remember being really upset about that. Like, why are we doing this? And I remember it was one chief, I can't remember who, like the name right now. But he kind of grabbed me because, you know, there's things that chiefs could do back then they can do now. And gave me like a little, got me close and said, he said to me, we do this because we have to show them that no matter what, this flag will fly.
Yeah.
And still, at that time, Amaury Ponciano still that went over his head. Like I still was like, whatever, man. Like in my head, of course, I didn't say that to the chief. But as I gotten older, I'm very appreciative that we did that we find things to, and that symbol was so huge for all of us to just see that we were not defeated. Like the ship was like tilted, yet we were having colors. We were manning the weapons. We finally got the Marines, the fast team, to come help us, and then we have a couple of ships that came help us. But it was just little things like that. So as far as the leadership, I think the communication was there, like in the sense of like they let us know when the divers were coming to bring the bodies. Like anything else, right? That there's certain things that was said that I feel like might feel like there was an insult to our intelligence, but it was more to try to, I don't know, to trying to like keep us a little level-headed. Because, for example, one of the things that was said was that smell that we were smelling was food being rotten. No,
and you guys knew the truth, yeah.
You know what I mean? But like I think it was just hard to say that. Like that's the smell of
right.
that passed.
Of our
yeah, you know.
Yeah. So, and I mean, everybody didn't know how to deal with something like this. I mean, when you really think about it, like nobody thinks that this is really going to happen. Yes, we train for it and we do drills in case something like this happens, but you never know what is going to happen or how people are going to react until they did. And I do think that the fact that they tried to give you guys a sense of normalcy as soon as they could says a lot as well. I mean, it's definitely something that I would also think over the years we probably would deal with differently now than we did back then, just because we're so much more as a force educated about mental health. I mean, looking back on it, perhaps they should have immediately flew in grief counselors to talk to the crew and to really help you guys process what had happened. How long did you stay on Cole after this happened, though? Because I think you stayed on there quite a while afterwards.
Yeah, so I stay on board. Actually, I was not lucky. I was one of the few that was selected to bring one of the bodies back. So I left before most of the crew did. I brought one of Seaman Guana, who was in the IT. Me and him were really close. So I was chosen to bring his body back to his family. So I left the ship about like 7 days after the bombing. And once I landed in Virginia, thankfully someone was like, you guys are not trained to do that. Plus all the things that you went through, you need to go take leave, convalesce, see your family. We have people that this is what they're trained to do, is to bring the bodies and to, because I was in my mind, I was being told like I was going to be the one giving his mother the flag, like, but that's also where something very pivotal in my life in the Navy happened, which was we were forced. And I say forced because we didn't have a choice. They literally took the bus and took us there to go to Portsmouth and be seen by psychiatrists, right? And to fill all these questionnaires, and they asked all these questions. And at the time, I didn't know, but it was kind of trying to build a database of like where we were at that moment, and then see how we will go from there. Because from that point, every 3 months, I had to do the same questions, and they will force us to go. And I say force because I could tell you right now, and just being completely honest, because of my background, I don't know if I would have ever went and got sick help, because that was not the macho thing to do. And especially back in 2000, right?
Yeah.
That would have not been something that I would have got up and say, the fact that I'm talking to people in this way and I'm being so angry or being so degrading to someone, maybe I got issues. Nope, I would just been like, or he deserve it. Like, so it was very pivotal because I would have not taken that step, and I'm grateful that Navy made all of us from the cold to do that.
And they probably tracked all you guys, now that I'm thinking about it. Like every single one of you have probably been in some way tracked, because as we all know too, this will transcend further than just your military service. This goes into your VA claim and later on with disability services. So I'm sure that it's advantageous of the Navy to know how this kind of a trauma impacts you all. And there's not many people other than the ones that were on the McCain or the Fitzgerald or you guys that have really gone through something so horrific that impacted so many people. And so it makes sense that they'd want to know where you're at now, how you've coped since, and how you're doing. And so so in a way, it was, I guess, a blessing in disguise, not that it happened, but that you were able to get the care that you needed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, and that's why then after a while, after about a year, we had a choice whether you could stay part of the crew because it was going to be treated as a pre-com unit because they had to fix the ship and or you could take orders somewhere. I wanted to take orders somewhere else, but for some reason they didn't have nothing for San Diego for a little seaman, which to this day I find that very hard to believe. But I decided to stay with the ship. But what happened is once we had to go back on board, once she was getting fixed in Mississippi, I started to have flashback nightmares and like all these different things. And that's when I was diagnosed with PTSD, which was about a year later. And I was taken off the ship and sent to a shore command so I could be able to go and get medical treatment. And I have PTSD ever since.
Yeah. And what fascinated me, and you mentioned it in the book, is that you didn't, I mean, I don't know if you mentioned, I don't think you mentioned much in the way of medication. You mentioned much in the way of treatment and talk therapy and owning your shit and journaling. And I just think that that's sometimes the harder road, but it's the better road. And nowadays there's even better ways that you probably weren't afforded, like EMDR, which is what I was able to have at my last duty station. That was a game changer, where it short circuits a lot of those traumatic moments, and then you can live in that moment for just a small period of time and grieve through it. And I've never experienced anything like that. It was incredible, the impact that experience had on me and my journey with PTSD. So tell me a little bit about some of the ways in which you were able to be seen, some of the therapies that you received and how it impacted you, how it changed you.
So they did start it with medication, but I noticed that always doing it was bringing me down even more. So then I will be even more depressed because
Yeah.
I didn't have no energy to even see my daughter. I love my daughter, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me. And then next now my son, and there will be days that I would just be like, I don't want to move from my couch, and it would just be like these medicine were like downers, right? And then when I actually got smart to like look at what the side effects were, I was like, I don't want to take this. And of course, I didn't do the right thing. Like, I just stopped taking it on my own without like talking to my psychiatrist until like a month and a half later. And he's like, you should be getting a new like you should be getting new ones. And I'm like, no, I still have them all. And he's like, why haven't you been taking it? And I was like, because I'm not part of my language. I feel like shit, like when I take it, right?
And that's the thing. A lot of times they'll send you to a psychiatrist first, and then you have to get a referral from the psychiatrist to a psychologist for some of these other kinds of treatments. And we're only beginning, I feel, to open up the spectrum of all the different treatments that can be available that are not a pharmaceutical solution.
So from there, he took me to a different approach, which was like getting more into therapy and getting into like, so most of mine were to start at the beginning was a lot of reliving it, right? Like a lot of like I need you to walk me through kind of what I just did, like, but even with more detail. Like, I remember one of them, she wanted me to tell her, like, even what I was smelling at the time, and then, like, what I was seeing, and it was a constant reliving it. And then we will pause at some point, and she will tell me, like, how do you feel about that, or how do you feel
for you?
yeah. And then I just constantly did that. What I will tell you, though, is through the years is that I started noticing, like, how it affected my body, right? And how I knew that I will be, like, in a really high, and when I needed to go see someone, because I was starting to go down. And it will be with my temper. It would be with my lack of patience. And then it will also manifest on my desire to, like, feel whether it was wanted or feel as important, both at my work and then with women, right? And then when those things will peak, I will be like, I need to go see someone. And at the beginning, it wasn't like that. Like, I didn't put it together, right? Like, I would just who I was until I went to England. And they had to send me out of town because the base that I was there was very small. And that counselor, I don't know if she had both, the social and then also, like, to do with, like, sexual behavior, but, like, she was able to merge and, like, find things by talking about my childhood and my past and the things that I went through, and even got me to she was the first person that I opened up about me being raped in the military. And so then, like, that brought up a lot of questions, and, like, how do you feel? How do you so yeah, so it's been part of my life ever since.
I feel like a lot of times the therapist will not address the sexual side, because I was very promiscuous most of my teenage years, most of my 20s. Then I got married for 7 years. Then I got divorced, became promiscuous again. And there was so much hurt and so much pain that was behind that way of acting and the way of just moving so quickly with men. And I think that with men, especially men who are womanizers, or especially ones that are not, like, in honest, open relationships, we're not talking about that. We're talking about people, like, who date multiple women and are not honest with the fact that they're dating multiple women or sleeping with multiple women. And we never address that in society. We never have open conversations about it. And that's what your book weaves that theme throughout, that you were just constantly dating different women. And these women didn't know that this stuff was wrong with you, or that this was really what was behind this behavior. I'm sure that they didn't understand it.
Yeah, but what I will say, because I like to take responsibility, right? Like, they didn't know, right? Like, or they knew, but they only knew, like, the Cole, right? They didn't, like, for example, they didn't know the rape part or other things, and on how that all play into, and even my childhood, all those three things, how they play up to, like, how, because it's all part of insecurities, right? Like, that this need to feel wanted and
get that attention,
to feel validated. It's all insecurities, right? So, like, they were not necessarily aware of all that stuff, but it was mostly because I was hiding it, and also I will use it myself as an excuse as to why I did this.
Yep, that's what we were talking about. Call. Absolutely, because you re-traumatize yourself when you've had that childhood trauma. So then it's like you didn't really heal from it, and you didn't allow yourself to properly grieve for it. And so you just continue to embrace relationships and dynamics that were played out in your childhood, whether it be, for me, chasing men that didn't want me, or constantly having this weird dynamic with another woman where it was a power struggle. I mean, I've had those all throughout my life, and they are a direct reflection of the power struggle that me and my mother had growing up. And I still have to be very, very cautious and sensitive to working closely with women, because I know that if a woman tries to pull a power play on me, I shut down and I get so stressed out about it. If a man does it, I'm kind of like, oh, whatever. And I kind of laugh it off and I don't even care. And maybe that's why I've been able to succeed so much in the military, because I mean, the way men act don't really bother me because I just don't have that issue. But when it comes to women, ooh, the woman who pulls a game like that, because it triggers something from my childhood. So when you tell your story, I hear so much of my own, in that you were sort of just replaying this need to be wanted and to always have somebody around and always have this attention, because you felt abandoned by your mother. You felt that your father wasn't really the man that you thought he was. And then you have Cole happen, and the people there, that was traumatic, and you had to work through that. So you were just constantly just kind of trying to figure out what you were going to do. And then during that time, you still met amazing women. You got married, you had children.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, especially like I said, for my marriage, right? When I was married, like, you know, if you would have asked me as it was happening and why because I cheated, well, I would tell you the things that she was not doing, which that, first of all, there's no reason to cheat, right? Like that, in the sense of like, you are doing it because you choose to do it. Like, that's how I believe anyway. Like, I agree
with you. There's still responsibility on your end for doing the act. There's a reason why you're doing it, but if you don't own the fact that you made the mistake and that you were dishonest, then you're never going to grow and you're never going to stop doing it.
Well, even when, you know, these women, like as you said, had all these wonderful things, I was still focused on like who else might like me or who else I could be with. And I'm just completely going to be honest here. And this is something that, like, you know, my fiance knows to this day. It's a struggle, even to this day, right? Like, it just, in the sense of like having to process those things, right? To be able to be like, okay, like, you know, let me find validation on just simply on the fact that she's thinking about me and she said good morning to me, or she did this, instead of trying to find validation from another individual. Like, that, just things that I still have to process. It's not something that comes natural to like other people. They're just like,
I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm so obsessed with my work. And then when work wasn't going to be the place where I could really express myself and be me anymore, then I was like, oh, I found podcasting, you know? I mean, honestly, like, I'm still that person that's struggling and trying to figure out my purpose and you know, what I was meant to do, and trying to get that validation somewhere, because that's what we do when we've been traumatized. We're just kind of chasing. And then we got another person who just joined, Veronica Scott. She said, just joined. On a side note, Master Chief, congratulations on your upcoming retirement. Hoo-yah. So, yeah. So you definitely got some friends. I noticed a lot of people from my some of my audience that are enlisted were definitely tuning in, and I'm just honored that you agreed to come on this show. And I think about like how we met. I mean, I met you at a conference. It was a mental health summit. It was for NAV I4. And I think you came and you gave a speech there. And so that's a great bridge, because I know we're kind of closing up the call soon, but after you go through all this therapy and this treatment, and you've had some of the marriages that didn't work out, and now you're on this path, suddenly this opportunity opens up for you to start sharing some of these experiences, correct?
Yeah, life is funny like that, right? How you just happen to be in the right place, the right time. So I went to MPS, Naval Postgraduate School, so I received my master's. So because of that, I could only go to a specific commands, because of course the Navy wants to get their money back from giving me that education. And one of them was Police Cyber Command here in Maryland. I get here and I put on 9. Like, the results come out literally like a week after I check in. So I'm a Master Chief. I go check into my CMC at the time, and he's reading my bio, and he's just sees I was on the Cole, the time frame, and he's like, "Were you there when?" I was like, "Yes." So then he just straight looks at me and he's like, "Have you heard about warrior toughness?" And I was like, "Nope, I haven't heard anything," because this is back in 2022. And and he's like, he started explaining to me and how he used to be the one that went around to teach other commands within our domain, all the other 35, 37 commands that are under our umbrella. And he said, like, I will have a chaplain to talk about the soul. I have a resilient officer to talk about the mind. And he's like, I'm the warrior, right? As the enlisted. And he's like, I can think of someone that will be best suited to be that person. And he was like, are you comfortable talking about the Cole? Funny enough, my part of healing about the Cole is talking about it. Some people don't talk about it. I'm the type, I could talk about it over and over and over and over, and it just actually makes me feel better. Like that's how I let it go.
It does. When you talk about a traumatic experience, I can tell you when I shared about my complex trauma PTSD, and I actually went into some of the ways in which I felt abandoned by my parents, it has made me so much more able to understand and process it, and it doesn't trigger me anymore. Like I can think about it now and not feel that anger and that madness that I felt for so many years. I don't feel it anymore. Good. It's crazy.
Yeah. So then we still had, because there was a mandate that came from Navajo 4 that we needed to go and teach all these different commands. So then I started traveling, and it started with that. It started because I needed to teach the warrior toughness course. Because people will go and get the NEC, but that will be like one person for 300 people. So then we will go and teach my team, the three of us, the chaplain, the resident officer, and me, and we will go to the command, kind of like think about when they do DC training that you're doing it on board the ship, and divisions that are more willing to let you go do something if you're still on the command than it is send you to a school. So then we will build a team for that, for the warrior toughness, so it will be more than one person. And while I was doing that, people will be like, hey, have you ever thought about writing a book? Have you ever thought about sharing your experiences and talking on a larger platform? And I was like, well, I don't mind it, but I know that the Cole is something that it's like, it was only 300 of us that went through it, right? But I also don't feel like my life is nothing special. I feel like we all have trauma. We all have deal with things in life. Right. So at first it was very like, what am I going to be writing about, or what am I going to be talking about that like someone else cannot? And then I started to step back, and I was like, if I can make the difference on one person for whatever that group that I'm talking to, then I'm doing something right. And if anything else, it helped me because I love meeting sailors. I love traveling, and I love talking about being resilient, because that's beyond the Navy. Resiliency is not just about the Navy. And I'm very big on understanding your why, having a purpose. And as I said earlier, when I was talking about, which I didn't know back then, that I wanted to go back to my mother. That was my purpose back then. And as life has continued, it changed from my mother, it went to my children. And now it's still my children, but it's also like, what is my legacy? Right. And when you find that purpose, that why, or why you're doing the things that you do, it allows you to think of things like, okay, this might look like I'm being selfish, or it's about me that I'm talking about these experiences, but it's more about what it might do to other people. And I could tell you, I've been very blessed that I've been to a lot of places where sailors have taken me to the side and either said, thank you for hearing someone that felt the same way they feel, or they're going through the same things, or have dealt with mental health, or even to the extreme where I had a sailor that literally said, can you go with me after I spoke in that command? Can you go with me to the hospital right now? Because after hearing you, I feel comfortable going and speaking to someone. And that meant the world to me, that the sailor was open enough to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it just shows you the power of sharing your story, and how sharing stories heals everyone. I mean, that's what your book is all about. I mean, this, like I said, this is probably one of the, it's upside down. This is probably one of the best memoirs I've ever read. I mean, it's so well written too. I think that's what also impressed me, like the grammar and the organization of it. I mean, I don't know if you had a book coach or how you even did this.
That's why if you go and see in the page, and the co-author is my fiance, because she helped me with my Spanglish, because it was not. I could tell stories but she helped me with making sure that it was making sense, that it was done properly. So kudos to her.
It's so good. Please tell her I said that. I mean, and I read a lot of people's books, and as I told you earlier, at first I'm reading all this backstory, and I'm like, okay, where's this going? And then the Cole, and then you're so transfixed by the Cole story that you're just kind of hanging in there, and then you realize like, oh wait a minute, there's this whole backstory, and then that's when I realized how important it was for me to understand the trauma with your mother and your father, and the things growing up, and the ways in which you started basically being a player at a very young age. Like this was a learned behavior and a habit. You were like, well, shit, I can get women. I can get this attention. And I was the same way with men. And when you know that you've had that from a very young age, and for me, it was associated with drinking. It was associated with having a good time. I mean, and that's where it's hard to even reconcile to this day. And I think you mentioned that this day, you kind of struggle with it because there were parts of it that were really fun and really exciting.
Yeah.
It doesn't go away just because you don't do it anymore. And so you have to reconcile like, okay, well, is that going to put me on the path for my legacy and for the things that are higher priorities that I know now that I appreciate and I love? But I just applaud you so much. It was such a great book, and I'm so glad that you put it out there. It's a wonderful contribution to a sailor, to like military history, military stories, and I think this needs to be like on like Blue Jacket reading lists or CNN reading list or something like that. I really do, and I hope my show has done a little part to help you get there because it's a great book.
I appreciate it, right? I think the best thing about it, or the biggest thing about it, is this transparency in the sense of like, I'm a man full of flaws. I still make mistakes today. I still struggle with a lot of things, but we can still get the goals that we want, and even be successful. Because I'm not trying to be cocky, but I could consider myself successful.
Yeah, you are.
And understand that we still have those issues, right? Like it doesn't need to take everything away from us or not achieve the things that we want to do. We just have to acknowledge it, and we need to try to be better each day. How that looks like, that's up to you, but that's the goal. It's just to be the best version of ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that's what I really liked about it, is that it just shows that, like, I always call it like us trauma kids. It shows that, like, even the people that had some shit growing up or had some painful struggles, and again, my struggles compared to maybe other people's is nothing, whatever. But it just shows that like anybody can make it. Anybody can be a little bit better. Even I watch a show called Soft White Underbelly, and God bless Mark Leda for all the good work he's doing, working with those people in Skid Row and elsewhere, because their best that they can do might just be the fact that they, I don't know, find a warm tent that's better than the tent that they were in before. I mean, you really have to like look at it like holistically and say everybody's trying to do the best they can with what they have, where they are, and you've definitely shown that there's that growth. Where can people find you? And is there anything else that I haven't covered on?
No, I'm easy to find. I don't have nothing like too crazy. I'm just a regular guy on Instagram. You put my name, my first name, and you'll find me, Amaury Ponciano, and will come up. Same thing on Facebook, and the LinkedIn as well. And thank you for the opportunity. That's first and foremost, right? It's been a pleasure talking, and it's been very good to like kind of bounce even before we started some of the things that we share just for our own in the ways of like how we have lived our lives. I'm thankful for your transparency as well, right? As all the things that the other podcasts that you have and the things that you have shared with people, and I see all the things that you write as you going on to. Have done stories and gone through different places, and even at SUPCS. I feel like we need more people like that be transparent in the sense of like, again, you can still be successful, you can still achieve a lot of things, but we're all human. Then no one is not. It doesn't have a little bit of demons going on. Like there's always something that we have to worry about. Or if it's not you, then it's someone that you care and love about, that they're struggling with something, and that becomes your burden as well. So give yourself grace. Continue to try to be the best version of yourself, and understand that having a purpose can allow you to get away from a lot of dark places.
Absolutely. Find your purpose. And I think I've definitely found mine with the Stories of Service podcast and serving in the Navy as a PAO. I've had a wonderful career. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to meet you backstage and say goodbye, but I'm going to go full screen real quick and say goodbye to the audience. Thank you so much for joining me. You can see I'm starting to get my office a little bit more decorated. We'll be doing some more soon, but I do like the neon lights. I thought that was a nice touch. So very special thanks to the husband for helping me put together that. Next week, I'm going to be having Bill Brown on the show. He is a Navy SEAL, my first Navy SEAL. He hosts the yearly New York City Hudson River swim. And he is also a huge advocate for Pete Hegseth, the prospective SecDef, who you may have seen me doing postings on as well. So I can't wait to talk to him to get his story and hear more about what he's up to. He's now a lawyer with the Tim Parlatore law firm. So really excited to have him on. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. As I always finish these calls, please take care of yourself, take care of each other, and bye-bye now.